They thought Insidious would be a failure, and it made millions. It's not an exaggeration. It was midnight on September 14, 2010, at the Toronto Film Festival, and James Wan couldn't hide his nerves. In just a few seconds, the first screening of Insidious would begin, a movie filmed in barely 3 weeks with a $1.5 million budget. For anyone, it would have been an important night, but for him, it was much more than that. After a few stumbles and being typecast as the director of Saw, he was convinced that another failure could bury his career. But how did he end up in that situation? This is the story of how a director twisted the fate that Hollywood had in store for him and ended up changing low-budget horror movies forever. A quick favor before we begin. If you enjoy our videos, please don't hesitate to share them. For some reason, there are times when our videos get fewer than 1,000 views, and that makes it really hard to keep the same level of quality as always. When you like, subscribe, and share the video, you're helping us keep the channel alive. To dive into the dark corners of Insidious, we have to get to know the main man behind it, James Wan. Today, he is one of the masters of modern horror, but there was a time when his career seemed to have reached a dead end far too soon. Born in Malaysia and raised in Australia, he discovered his passion for movies at a very young age, especially when he saw Poltergeist. The story of a family haunted by supernatural forces disturbed him forever, inspired him to make movies, and showed him that it was possible to terrify an audience without excessive violence, an idea he would never abandon, although in his 2004 feature film debut, Saw, he leaned into the gore. He was barely 26 years old when he directed the movie in 18 days, with just over $1 million and practically a single location. Written by his best friend Leigh Whannell, Saw was a hit that launched a franchise and turned Wan into the new rising star of horror movies. But that triumph came at a cost. Hollywood saw him solely as a director of bloody movies. They even called him the godfather of torture porn, a subgenre based on sadism. When he tried to do something different with Dead Silence, the studio stepped in to push it closer to the style of Saw. Shortly after, with Death Sentence, he tried making a revenge movie, although that didn't work out either, mainly due to a confusing marketing campaign that ended up hurting him. In just a few years, Wan went from being considered a visionary to feeling exhausted by Hollywood's demands. He stayed connected to the Saw franchise as a producer, but he hated that his name was exclusively associated with explicit violence. He was convinced that if he ever returned to directing, he would only accept a project with absolute creative freedom, something that seemed impossible. The studios were only offering him remakes and gore movies. Disillusioned, he decided to return to Australia with Whannell to step away from the industry. Everything pointed to that meteoric career having come to an end, until he received an offer that was as unexpected as it was challenging. In late 2009, Wan was ready to leave Hollywood and never return, when he got a call from Whannell, who sounded euphoric. He said he had received a call from Oren Peli. Wan knew exactly who he was. Thanks to Paranormal Activity, he had revolutionized the box office, confirming that low-budget horror was still in great shape. But what caught his attention was another phrase from Whannell. "James, they are offering us the holy grail, total creative control." Intrigued, Wan went with Whannell to a meeting with Peli and producer Jason Blum, the man behind the independent company Blumhouse. After the success of Paranormal Activity, both wanted to produce a new generation of horror movies with a very simple formula: budgets under $2 million in exchange for absolute freedom for the filmmakers and distribution through the studio system. Wan didn't hide his amazement. It was what he had been waiting years for, until Peli mentioned that he loved Saw. Now the director thought he was facing just another pair of Hollywood businessmen who were going to destroy his vision and typecast him. So he got straight to the point. If he agreed to work with them, he wanted to make a haunted house story, like Poltergeist, based on atmosphere and suspense, not gallons of blood. He wanted to prove that it was still possible to scare the audience without resorting to gruesome extremes. That determination could have bothered Peli and Blum, but they were both thrilled. They only had one condition. The budget would be just $1.5 million, and the filming would have to be short. Wan accepted without hesitation. With the deal closed, he and Whannell started writing a script. They wanted to bring back the spirit of classic haunted house stories, but they needed an element to set them apart. After many scrapped ideas, they found the answer in a concept rarely explored by horror movies: astral projection. Inspired by his experiences with sleep paralysis, Whannell imagined a boy whose spirit leaves his body and gets trapped in another dimension. That's how they realized the house wouldn't be haunted. The real danger would be one of its inhabitants. With that premise, Whannell traveled to Australia and had 2 weeks to write a script. The story would center on the Lambert family, who suffer from supernatural phenomena in their new home. They turn to a group of specialists led by Elise Rainier, but the threat is far more terrifying than they imagined. The project's first title was The Further, and then Astral, until they landed on a scarier one, Insidious. After thinking about leaving Hollywood for good, Wan finally had what he had been demanding for years: absolute creative freedom. But that freedom brought a massive challenge. How do you make a movie capable of terrifying an audience with barely $1.5 million and without relying on cheap gore? Wan already had the story he had been dreaming of for years and the freedom to film it. Now he needed something just as difficult: putting together a crew willing to make a great movie with minimal resources. His main ally would still be Whannell. On top of writing the script, he would play Specs, one of Elise's assistants. He would also use pre-production to research paranormal cases and talk to mediums, trying to make the story as believable as possible. Wan also chose collaborators used to working quickly and creatively, like makeup designer Justin Raleigh. But the biggest challenge was still the cast. He couldn't hire huge stars, but he didn't want actors associated with low-budget movies either. He needed solid actors who could make the family drama believable, even knowing they would get paid very little. He talked about this issue with Blum, who found the solution. The actors would get the union minimum wage, but in exchange, they would get a percentage of the profits. It was a risky gamble that only those who truly believed in the project would accept. And Wan looked for exactly that kind of actor. For the role of Josh Lambert, he needed someone capable of conveying the warmth of a family man and at the same time, the darkness the ending required. He found those qualities in Patrick Wilson, who had done massive blockbusters as well as intimate dramas. That very thing could have made him turn the project down, but he accepted immediately. He saw it as an exercise in pure acting. For the role of Renee, the mother, Wan turned to Rose Byrne, an Australian actress who was still trying to break into Hollywood. At first, she wasn't sure. She knew she would barely get paid and she needed the money. Even so, she liked the pitch and wanted the movie to get made. Wan had the parents of the Lambert family, but he needed the kids, especially Dalton, the boy trapped by the forces of the underworld. Wilson suggested Ty Simpkins, since they had worked together as father and son in Little Children. Wan took advantage of that chemistry to reinforce the Lambert family's realism, and while he was at it, saved time on extensive casting calls. The last key role was Elise. The choice was Lynn Shay. She had been acting since the 70s, but always in supporting or straight-up minimal roles. She had even appeared in horror movies, but her characters usually didn't even have a name. That didn't stop her from gaining fans like Wan and Whannell. They first worked with her on the short film Doggy Heaven, and later the director called to send her the script. Shay read it and got so scared that she put it in a closet, although she ultimately accepted. Now, Wan finally had the cast for Insidious, but he realized he was missing a crucial element: the villain, known as the red-faced demon. While looking for someone to play him, he hired composer Joseph Bishara to create a haunting soundtrack inspired by classic horror. During a meeting, the director paid attention to his features. He had a very sharp bone structure, an intense gaze, and a commanding presence. After sorting out the music details, he asked him, "Would you be up for playing the demon?" Bishara gladly accepted. He was a devoted fan of the genre and saw it as a golden opportunity to connect the visuals with the score. In just a few weeks, Wan put together a crew willing to take on the risk. Now came the hardest test of all: filming Insidious in barely 21 days. The director knew very well that, with such a tight budget, there was no room for error. Any delay could put the entire production at risk. Filming for Insidious began in late April 2010, and Wan took advantage of everything he learned during Saw. That movie had hidden its limitations with a restless camera and frantic editing. This time he wanted the exact opposite: elegant shots, precise camera movements, and an atmosphere inspired by classic horror. But pulling that off with so little money would require more creativity. The first decisions aimed to save money without sacrificing quality. Instead of building expensive sets, the crew filmed in 2 real houses in Los Angeles, adapted to represent the Lambert family's homes. The solution provided a sense of authenticity that's hard to achieve on a soundstage, and it was much cheaper. Another challenge was the terrifying scenes. Wan ruled out digital technology, not just because of a lack of budget. He wanted old-school, practical effects to evoke the spirit of Poltergeist. For the red-faced demon, he wanted something straight out of a theatrical painting or a childhood nightmare. But there was an issue. Using hyper-realistic latex prosthetics required hours of application and a lot of money. The director talked to Raleigh, who designed a makeup look based on red and black face paint and simple claws applied directly onto Bishara. But the movie also featured other macabre entities, like the Bride in Black. Here, Raleigh used makeup with heavy gray and white base tones, exaggerated eyelashes, and fixed expressions. Then Wan made sure to light them with harsh lights surrounded by darkness. That same ingenuity was applied to the supernatural settings. The deformed shadows were created using real actors and lighting tricks, without resorting to green screens. Wan didn't forget that the creepiest place in Insidious was the Further, the dark dimension where the red-faced demon lives. With the little money available, it was built in the abandoned Herald Examiner newspaper building. Then they painted some rooms black, filled the place with smoke machines, and gave Wilson a real flashlight as his only light source. The darkness hid the boundaries of the location and made the space feel infinite. infinite. At that point, Wan could have given in to CGI to show how the spirits walk on walls, defying gravity, but he didn't. Since there was no more money to pay for a rotating platform, Wan remembered the 60s Batman series and brought back the same trick used to simulate climbing buildings. So he had a wall built on the floor and rotated the camera 90 degrees, creating a convincing illusion. On a bare-bones production like Insidious, Wan knew that the biggest risk wasn't a failed special effect, but losing the cast's trust. If a single actor stopped believing in the project, everything could fall apart. From the very first day, he gathered the cast to explain exactly how he pictured the movie. He didn't just give them notes on their characters, he also showed them how he planned to film each scene so everyone would understand the atmosphere he was trying to build. That constant communication proved crucial on a set where there was almost no time for rehearsals, retakes, or extensive coverage. Every single day required getting through a massive amount of script pages. The pace was exhausting, but the cast's response surprised the director. Wilson told him he enjoyed working that way because it reminded him of a play. Less Hollywood bureaucracy, more acting. Byrne shared that feeling, and they both valued the creative freedom Blum and Pelly had promised. In fact, neither of them called the director to harass him like a typical executive would. Wan also worked very closely with Shay, who had to face some of the most demanding scenes of her career. During the seance sequence, a poorly fitted gas mask was pinching and squeezing her, to the point that it almost took her eye out. Noticing her discomfort, Wan called the art director to fix it in a matter of minutes. On a production with such a tight schedule, any inconvenience could turn into a serious problem. But now they tightened the mask so much that Shay couldn't breathe. The director started getting impatient with the lack of a solution, until the actress told him she was really enjoying the movie and the character, and kept going as soon as they managed to adjust the mask. Wan knew how to work with the adult cast, but the kids were a bigger challenge, especially Simpkins, who was 8 years old. The director wanted to protect him, but he also needed him to convey fear convincingly. Just like in Little Children, Wilson once again played a key role, sticking by his side on and off the set, as if he were actually his father. For the scenes where Dalton interacts with the red-faced demon, Wan had an idea. Before filming those parts, he took Simpkins to the makeup room, introduced him to Bashara, and told him, "Look, it's just an actor in makeup." The kid got excited, and Bashara was really warm with him, and they even let him apply a little bit of makeup. The plan worked better than expected. Halfway through filming, Simpkins was already relaxed and having fun. Since they still had to get some shots of terror and suffering, the director had to figure out how to get him into a state of distress, but the kid now pulled it off without any problems. After 21 days of non-stop work, filming for Insidious wrapped up. Wan had managed to complete it without going a single cent over the $1.5 million budget. And he knew how to keep saving money. He edited the movie himself, at home on his personal computer. He worked in the garage first, but it was so cold that he had to set up in the kitchen. Far from seeing it as a setback, he felt like he was going back to the days when he made movies out of pure passion, before Hollywood's demands. In just a few days, Wan had Insidious ready. Blum and Pelly were convinced they had something special on their hands, but they knew the audience especially had to like it, even though it still didn't have a studio willing to distribute it. They said it would be ideal to screen it at a major festival, where it could catch the attention of a company. And then came the opportunity that defined everything. Today, Insidious is an undisputed classic, which is why it's hard to think its fate came down to a single screening. But shortly after finishing the final cut, Wan got a call from Pelly with some great news. Insidious had been selected for the Toronto Film Festival. It would have its premiere in the Midnight Madness section, considered the most important showcase for fantasy and horror movies. The director was happy, and also a little nervous. That audience had a reputation for being the most passionate and demanding on the circuit. If they thought a movie was bad, slow, or boring, their reaction could be ruthless. And Wan had reasons to worry. A lot of the attendees were expecting another Saw, packed with blood and violence. Insidious, on the other hand, relied on atmosphere and acting, following the tradition of classics like Poltergeist. If the gamble failed, it wouldn't just be the movie in danger. After 2 back-to-back disappointments, his directing career would be buried. When the night of the screening arrived on September 14, 2010, the Ryerson Theatre in Toronto was packed. Wan attended alongside Whannell, Wilson, Byrne, Shay, Blum, and Pelly. As the lights went down, the director could barely hide his nerves. He knew the first few minutes would be decisive. He had built a slow-paced opening so the audience could get to know the Lambert family before facing the horror. If the theater lost its patience, everything would be lost. What's more, he would drag the entire crew who had trusted him down to failure. But during the opening scenes, nobody spoke, nobody laughed, nobody left the theater. The audience was completely absorbed by the story. When the big scares started, the screams and jumps confirmed that the tension had worked, especially with every appearance of the red-faced demon. Wan looked at Whannell, who gave him a wide smile back. They both realized the movie had connected with the audience. When the screening ended, the theater erupted in applause. Wan enjoyed that moment and the Q&A session with the audience. Nobody asked questions about the plot. Everyone congratulated them for bringing back horror based on atmosphere and suspense. The gamble that so many considered a mistake had just paid off. It seemed like Wan and his crew had plenty of reasons to celebrate, but there was an undeniable reality. Insidious still didn't have a distributor. They were talking about that issue as they walked out into the theater hallway, when they were approached by adults who didn't look like just regular fans of the genre. In fact, they were representatives from different studios interested in buying the movie. Blum and Pelly stayed behind to negotiate, and in 4 hours, the miracle happened. Sony Pictures' worldwide acquisitions acquired the U.S. distribution rights and the international rights for future sequels. After years of frustrations, Wan had proven that he could make exactly the kind of horror he had always imagined. Now all that was left to know was if the general public would react with as much enthusiasm as the crowd in Toronto. Wan didn't know how the movie would be received until April 1st, 2011. And the outlook didn't seem favorable. The director knew that popular horror was dominated by found footage and brutal carnage. Insidious was the exact opposite of all that. A haunted house movie with classic scares, blaring music, and a PG-13 rating, meaning suitable for ages 13 and up. A lot of industry analysts doubted that an approach like this could compete at the box office. Wan tried not to let those predictions get to him, even though his old insecurities were still lingering. After being typecast and the poor performances of Dead Silence and Death Sentence, he knew that Insidious could define the direction of his career. He found comfort talking with Whannell, and he also stayed in touch with the producers and the cast. They all encouraged each other and trusted that everything would turn out fine, until the first reviews came in. Wan read that several outlets praised the movie, highlighting the atmosphere, the effectiveness of the scares, and its ability to build tension on a minimal budget. But his smile faded when he read negative comments questioning the third act and the explanations involving astral projection and demonic possessions. The director didn't let it get to him. He knew the general public would have the final say. And then Insidious hit theaters, and it was a complete surprise. It grossed $13 million in its opening weekend. And let's remember, it had cost $1.5 million, plus a few extra marketing expenses. Wan was ecstatic, and that was just the beginning. No matter where he went, the director heard people talking about the movie. People were discussing scenes, revealing how much the red-faced demon had scared them, and debating about the further. A powerful word-of-mouth effect had built up, keeping it in theaters for months. That's how it grossed $97 million worldwide, becoming one of the most profitable horror movies in history. For Wan, the true triumph of Insidious went far beyond the numbers. He had proven he could make horror based on atmosphere, without relying on the gore that had made him famous. He won back the respect and admiration of Hollywood and the public. On top of that, he had fulfilled his dream of making the poltergeist of the new generation. And above all, he regained his faith in himself to direct. His career was safe. What he still didn't imagine was that this success would also kick off a franchise that would change his life once again. When Insidious became a massive hit, the inevitable happened. Hollywood wanted a sequel. Wan felt uncomfortable. He hated sequels, and he thought the exact same thing would happen as with the Saw franchise. They would end up losing quality and falling into the bloodiest excesses. Whannell feared the same thing until Blum and Pelly called to reassure them. The producers wanted the sequel, but they would only make it if they both returned as director and writer, respectively. They weren't going to make it with anyone else, and because of that, they were willing to wait as long as it took. That level of trust ultimately convinced them. Wan and Whannell picked up the story exactly where the first movie left off. They wanted to explore the fallout from the shocking ending and expand the supernatural universe of Insidious without repeating the same formula. While the previous one worked as a classic haunted house movie, the second part would be closer to a thriller with supernatural elements. Blum and Pelly loved the concept and immediately secured a $5 million budget. It was still a modest production by Hollywood standards, but enough to take a more ambitious step forward. Wan was ready to make Insidious Chapter 2, looking to release it in September 2013. But a problem came up. Being a highly sought-after director again, he had just signed with Warner Brothers to direct another haunted house story, The Conjuring, which we've already dedicated a video to. Faced with that situation, another director would have chosen to walk away from the cheaper production in favor of his opportunity with a massive studio. But Wan decided to do both. That's how a race against time began. Filming for The Conjuring took place during the first half of 2012, and as soon as post-production began, Wan used every bit of free time to work with Whannell on the script for Insidious Chapter 2. By the time January 2013 rolled around, the director felt exhausted, although he was ready to complete another short filming schedule packed with challenges every single day. But that wasn't the worst part. He still had to review the editing cuts, approve the sound mixes, and check the visual effects for The Conjuring. So during the day, he focused on the Lamberts, while at night and on weekends, he stayed with the Warrens. The director was on the verge of a breakdown, but the effort paid off. The Conjuring became another worldwide phenomenon and launched a new franchise, while Insidious Chapter 2 surpassed the success of the original. It grossed $161 million, and let's remember it cost $5 million. Wan could smile with satisfaction, but he was left more exhausted than ever. Just as he imagined, Blum and Pelly offered him the third part, and he was about to accept. It was his baby and it had resurrected his career. But he had to say no. He still loved Insidious and horror itself, but he preferred to step away from haunted houses and demons for a while. This time around, Blum and Pelly could have made a drastic decision, but they said they completely understood and let him continue as a producer for the franchise, preserving his connection to the project that had rescued his career. From then on, Wan cemented himself as one of Hollywood's most important directors. He alternated horror with massive blockbusters like Furious 7 and the Aquaman movies, although he never abandoned the genre that had turned him into a leading figure. As a producer, he pushed forward new installments of Insidious and The Conjuring, while continuing to discover and support new talent. The franchise also transformed the lives of those who were with him from the beginning. Whannell made his directorial debut with Insidious Chapter 3 before building a solid career behind the camera. Both this movie and Insidious: The Last Key gave more of the spotlight to Shay, who became one of the most beloved figures in contemporary horror. Meanwhile, Insidious: The Red Door reunited the original cast, with Wilson serving as both actor and director. At the same time, Jason Blum and Oren Peli cemented the low-budget production model that would turn Blumhouse into one of the most influential studios in the genre. After years of frustrations, struggles, and tensions, James Wan could feel satisfied, but he wasn't planning on abandoning the creation that had saved his career. Alongside Whannell, Blum, and Pelly, he produced the sixth installment, Insidious: Out of the Further. This time, directing was left in the hands of Jacob Chase, a filmmaker who came from independent horror. Chase caught people's attention with the short film Leigh, which he later turned into his first feature film, Come Play, produced by Amblin. Now he had to take control of one of the most profitable franchises in the genre and prove that The Further still has new horrors to reveal. With Insidious, James Wan wanted to prove that fear could be built in a different way. And something even more important, limitations aren't always an obstacle, but rather, they force us to find the best ideas. With barely 3 weeks of filming, a tiny budget, and a crew that bet on him when few others would, he ended up changing modern horror forever, proving that some revolutions don't come from money. They are born from someone who refuses to make the movie everyone expects. Now I want to hear from you. What's your favorite movie in the franchise? Let me know in the comments. The battle between Will Smith and Warner Brothers during I Am Legend ended up ruining the movie's ending. Imagine this. We're right